Madam Moderator, Ms. Grant, distinguished Prime Minister, members of the listening and viewing public, pleasant good evening. I am grateful for the opportunity this evening to be able to share with the public some information as it pertains to the reopening of schools in relation to the early childhood sector, the primary sector, as well as the secondary school sector. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the formulation and ongoing execution of a number of plans to reopen the early childhood sector. As was said, the sector was reopened yesterday with 14 of our 15 early childhood centers, government-run early childhood centers, opening their doors, and 5 private centers have already opened. I had the opportunity to stop by at least 4 of the early childhood centers yesterday morning and can report that these centers are fully ready to engage students. In fact, students were already there and the numbers were climbing. Prior to the close of all learning institutions in March, all workers in the early childhood sector and other sectors as well were sensitized to the COVID-19's impact on life and work. An update was given to the public via a presentation at the COVID-19 NEOC briefing about preparations to reopen early childhood centers within the Federation. And this is happening on a case-by-case basis. A sensitization plan on COVID-19 health and hygiene was developed for all workers in the early childhood sector in St. Kitts and Nevis. The plan was executed in a series of sessions addressing the COVID-19 health and hygiene guidelines for child care settings. Sessions were conducted by Dr. Randolyn Bradshaw, Dean of Health Sciences at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, and by co-facilitator Nurse Julie Blaze. In an attempt to address physical distancing at centers, the physical spaces of all public and private centers are being measured in terms of square footage. Each supervisor, and in the case of the private sector proprietors, would be issued an official letter that states the number of children that their center can accommodate. This is after the square footage of the space has been determined. Assessments to certify the readiness of early childhood centers have begun, and it's continuing. The assessments are conducted by a task force comprising of the director and resource teachers at the Early Childhood Development Unit, the Ministry of Education Task Force, and representatives from the Probation and Child Welfare Board. Assessments are based on measures outlined in an evaluation checklist. The checklist has been disseminated to all supervisors and proprietors. Assessments are being conducted on 3 private centers last week, and all 3 were granted approval of reopening. Since then, we have had 2 additional, bringing the number to 5. During the course of this week, 16 centers will be assessed, of which 14 are public and 2 private. Public and private centers are in the process of conducting meetings with parents to inform them about the terms and conditions of reopening the early childhood centers. So most of our centers, all of our centers, both public and private, are engaging parents at this time. A certificate of approval and a formal letter granting approval are issued to each facility deemed to be in compliance with the necessary COVID-19 guidelines for reopening. The issuance of approval is facilitated through the Early Childhood Development Unit in St. Kitts and the Department of Education on Nevis. Each center that gains approval must post the certificate of approval at a conspicuous point at the entrance of the facility. And this is for public information, so that the public, parents can be aware, they can know for certain that the centers are approved for opening. And I want to stress here that private centers should not open except this approval is given. And parents are asked to ensure that the certificate of approval is displayed for their information. The assessment of the schools on Nevis will continue in preparation for their opening on the 7th. Typically, the centers in Nevis do not open during the summer. Here in St. Kitts, we do. They will be open, the centers in St. Kitts will be open for the next 3 weeks. After that, the centers will close again for 1 week, where the centers are, well, further cleaned and their charts and so on are displayed and organized for the formal reopening in September. The public will be provided with pertinent information regarding the reopening of centers via forums such as this. Tomorrow we will be on Working For You, and we have already did a briefing at the weekly briefing of the COVID-19 task force. In addition to the video, flyers would be printed and information pertaining to children's arrival at school, their daily activities, departure from the centers. This would be discussed and disseminated via centers. So parents are asked to engage their respective centers for this information going forward. I turn now to give you a quick overview of what's happening at the primary and secondary levels. We have structured the term, or the school year, that begins September 2020 and ends in July 2021, in the 3 terms format as per usual. We have tried to work with the previously published dates for these terms, except in the first term where the term is extended by 1 week. For each term, we have designated the period known as instructional period, and all schools will be engaged in instruction from the 9th of September until the 4th of December. During that last week, that ends on December 11th, teachers will be preparing report cards, and these will be available for distribution as of that date or from the Monday following. For the benefit of parents, we have not dubbed an exam period for any of these terms. Assessments would be continuous, and so we don't expect students to be staying at home because exams are in progress. Assessment is continuous, and teachers would be encouraged to administer these assessments during their regular teaching periods, especially in secondary schools where you have a double period. We think that that would be enough time to carry out adequate assessments. In term 2, we are saying that as of now, no major sporting events as we know it will take place. But consideration will be given depending on what's happening in the country at the time. It is important to note that during term 3, the assessments that are done nationally as well as regionally will take place. This year we had to abort the administration of the test of standards. We hope that we would not have to do that in 2021. And so students and teachers and parents have to work in preparation for their assessment at the end of the school year. We wait on CXC to determine if the examinations, the CSEC and CAPE exams, will be done at the same time as this year, or if they would revert to going back to the normal time of examination. On the 7th and 8th of September, all teachers will report to their schools. All teachers will report to their schools. Of course, a number of teachers would be reporting to schools before, because some training will be taking place online as to equip our teachers to teach online. And so these training sessions will be held via online modality at schools. We don't want teachers complaining that they don't have devices or they don't have internet connectivity, and so we are saying that you can go to your school in order to be logged in for training. Some teachers would also be engaged in training in terms of the piloting of a new curriculum, the teachers of grades 4 and 6. And so they too would be going back to their school buildings before the 7th and 8th of September. But these are the official dates when we would have the official address to declare the academic year open by the Honorable Minister of Education. When students report on the 9th, all kindergarten grades 1 and 2 students will report to their schools. As of now, the plan is for all of these students to be in school every day, all day. Kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2. Some schools, the smaller schools and middle-sized primary schools, for now, will be returning to their school. All students will be returning full-time. In terms of the largest primary schools, 3 of them in Bastille, William Connor, Beach, Allen, and Tucker Clark, as well as Sandy Point Primary. These schools, as of now, will have to operate on a shift system because of their numbers. However, like the early childhood centers, there are persons going around to the primary schools to measure the space of these rooms to determine the square footage. Once that information is obtained, there's a formula that we use, and this can be done with using a device online. It will tell us the number of students that can fit into these rooms. If, for example, a middle-sized school is deemed to be overcrowded based on that formula, then we might have to say to that school, you have to do a shift system. But as of now, we have only designated 4 schools at the primary level to do a shift system. Students will be expected to report for the afternoon shift at 11:45. The morning shift is the usual time, 8:25. The afternoon shift is at 11:45 for reporting. We would like to encourage parents to ensure that students are sent out early because they have to go through the checking, the health checks, and on their arrival, taking their temperature, sanitizing their hands, and doing some screening. So we would like to get them there early enough for that. In terms of secondary school, the same thing is happening in terms of the square footage being determined for the various classrooms. This is indeed a big undertaking, and so we have not yet determined, or we have not yet received all of that information. However, the 2 high schools in Bastille will have to go on a shift system. For now, the other 4 secondary schools that are run by government are saying that they can have all of these students coming back. In the meantime, our secondary school, their team, principals and management teams are working on certain arrangements that would be unique to those particular institutions. So sometime towards the end of this week, we would be getting back with the secondary school principals for us to further discuss the plan that they are having, or that they are proposing for their institutions. A number of health protocols have also been developed, and this is a big piece of our plan to ensure that schools are sanitized, schools are clean. There are certain regulations that must guide the students during recess, during lunch, on arrival, on departure. already we are seeing that we're going to have serious challenges with students during recess time, because we would want to encourage them to keep the distance, but that's going to be a big challenge, the physical distancing, as well as when they have to leave the premises, whether it's for lunch or any other reason. So as of now, we are still discussing and getting ideas as to how we are going to guide the schools in getting the children out to lunch if they have to leave the premises, or if we're going to decide that there's nobody leaving for lunch, the lunch would have to be brought with them if they're not taking part in the school meal. So that is yet to be worked over. That is a big part of our concern. We have a number of other concerns in terms of getting additional staff to do some of these additional stuff at schools. And so all of these things we have to continue to work out and provide guidance with our principals. I have said quite a bit, and there is a lot more that we can say, but we want to hear from you, the members of the public, and so I would pause at this time to allow the Honorable Prime Minister to make his presentation.